My sister said real blood sits here at the family wedding and left me with the $120 reception bill after promising in front of everyone that we would split it 50-50 since we organized it together. For months, I planned every single detail while she only showed up to pick the most expensive things, saying, "You're the one who knows about these things, I trust you." But during the toast, she only thanked the true members of the Costa family, and when the waiter brought the bill, she pointed at me and said, "She's the official planner." I took the microphone, thanked them for the opportunity, and announced that as a wedding gift, I was donating the $120 to the local animal shelter in the couple's name, showing the receipt I had just made on the app 2 minutes earlier. The silence that followed was deafening. My sister Victoria's champagne flute froze halfway to her lips, her face draining of color as the full implication of what I had just announced sank in. Around us, 200 guests sat in stunned confusion, their heads swiveling between the massive screen displaying my donation receipt and Victoria's increasingly panicked expression. The groom's mother clutched her pearls, literally, while his father's face turned an alarming shade of purple. Victoria lunged for the microphone, but I stepped smoothly away, still smiling as I continued. Since Victoria was so generous in letting me handle all the wedding arrangements alone, I thought it only fitting to honor her selfless spirit by ensuring this beautiful celebration benefits those who truly need it. The Happy Paws Animal Shelter will be thrilled to receive this contribution. I held up my phone, showing the confirmed transaction timestamp of exactly 3 minutes ago. The receipt has already been sent to the IRS for tax purposes, of course. My sister and I shared the same mother but different fathers. Mom married my dad when she was 19, fresh out of community college and pregnant with me. They struggled financially for years while Dad worked his way up from warehouse supervisor to logistics manager. When I was 7, Dad died in a workplace accident. The settlement barely covered funeral costs and a year of bills. Mom was devastated, raising me alone in our small apartment while working double shifts as a dental hygienist. Then she met Richard Costa when I was 12. Richard was everything my dad wasn't. Wealthy, connected, charming in that smooth way that came from generations of country club memberships and Ivy League education. He swept Mom off her feet with expensive dinners and weekend trips to his lake house. They married within 8 months, and suddenly my world shifted from clearance rack shopping to designer labels I couldn't pronounce. Victoria was born 11 months later, and from that moment, I became acutely aware of my status as the before child. Growing up in the Costa household meant navigating an invisible hierarchy. Richard never said I wasn't his daughter, but his actions spoke clearly. Victoria got riding lessons while I got, "You already know how to ride a bike." Her birthday parties were catered affairs with pony rides and professional photographers. Mine were pizza parties in the backyard that Richard always seemed to have business trips during. When college came around, Victoria's tuition to Cornell was paid in full. I got a "We believe in the value of earning your education" speech and a stack of financial aid applications. Mom tried to balance things, but Richard's money gave him the power to dictate family dynamics. I learned early to be self-sufficient, working part-time through high school and taking out loans for state university. Victoria learned that batting her eyelashes at Daddy would get her anything she wanted. By the time I graduated with my business degree, I had developed a thick skin and a determination to never need the Costa money again, which made it all the more ironic when Victoria called me 6 months ago, voice dripping with fake sweetness, asking if I would help plan her wedding. "You're so organized, Charlotte," she cooed. "And you understand budgets and vendors and all that boring stuff. I just want to focus on being the bride." What she really wanted was my expertise without paying for a wedding planner, but I agreed. Maybe I was hoping for some sisterly bonding. Maybe I was stupid. The first red flag appeared during our initial planning meeting at Mom's house. Victoria spread out magazine clippings of venues that started at $20,000 for the space alone. "This is what I'm thinking," she announced, circling a historic mansion with crystal chandeliers. I gently pointed out that her stated budget of $30,000 total would barely cover the venue and catering. She waved dismissively. "Daddy will help if we go over. Besides, we're splitting everything 50-50, remember? So it's really not that much per person." I should have recognized the trap then. But Victoria had a gift for making her manipulation sound reasonable. "We'll each put in $15,000, she continued. "And anything extra we'll figure out together. Equal partners, equal responsibility." She even made me shake on it in front of Mom, who smiled with relief at seeing her daughters finally connecting. What I didn't know was that Victoria had no intention of paying her half. She had already calculated that once everything was booked and deposits paid, I would be too committed to back out. The next 4 months were a masterclass in selective participation. Victoria loved choosing the most expensive options for everything. $75 per plate dinner service, only the best for our guests. $2,000 floral arrangements, flowers make the atmosphere. $1,000 cake from that boutique bakery featured in Bride's magazine. It's my wedding day. But when invoices came due, Victoria was mysteriously unreachable. Texts went unanswered. Calls went to voicemail. When I finally cornered her at a family dinner, she looked at me with wide, innocent eyes. Didn't I mention? Cash flow is super tight right now with the honeymoon planning. Can you cover this month and I'll reimburse you? It was always next month. Always tomorrow. Always soon. I kept a detailed spreadsheet of every expense, every promise, every dodge. The total climbed past $40,000 as Victoria continued selecting premium options while I frantically called in every vendor favor I had earned through my event marketing job. The wedding was transforming into a showcase of excess, and I was drowning in debt to make it happen. 2 weeks before the wedding, I sat down with Victoria and her fiancé Marcus at their apartment. I brought my laptop with the complete expense breakdown, color-coded and annotated. "We need to talk about payment," I said, keeping my voice level. "The total is now $41,000. Your half is $20,500. I need at least half of that by next week to cover the remaining vendor payments." Victoria studied her manicured nails while Marcus shifted uncomfortably. Finally, she looked up with that practiced expression of wounded innocence. "Charlotte, you know how much this wedding means to me. Are you really going to make this about money? Can't you just trust that we'll pay you back?" "I've trusted you for 4 months," I replied evenly. "I've covered deposits, down payments, and final balances. I have receipts for every expense. This isn't about trust anymore. It's about you honoring your commitment." That's when Victoria's mask slipped. Her eyes went cold, her voice sharp. "You always do this. You always try to make everything about money because you're bitter about not being a real Costa. This is my wedding, my special day, and you're trying to ruin it with your petty accounting." Marcus at least had the decency to look ashamed. "Vic, we did agree to split costs," he murmured. She rounded on him with a glare that could freeze lava, and he immediately fell silent. I recognized that look. It was the same one Richard gave me when I dared question anything Costa-related. The conversation ended with Victoria declaring that we would settle up after the honeymoon, and me realizing I had been played from the beginning. The week before the wedding brought the final insult. The venue coordinator called to confirm the final payment of $8,300, due 48 hours before the event. I called Victoria 18 times. I texted. I emailed. I even showed up at her apartment, only to be told by Marcus that she was too stressed with wedding preparations to deal with administrative details. Administrative details. As if the financial backbone of her entire celebration was some minor paperwork issue. I maxed out my credit cards to make the final payment. My carefully built savings account, meant for a down payment on a condo, was depleted. The money I had set aside for my graduate school applications was gone. Everything I had worked for since college, every careful financial decision, was sacrificed to give my sister her dream wedding. And she couldn't even be bothered to answer my calls. The morning of the wedding, I woke up with clarity. I had spent weeks agonizing over whether to confront Victoria publicly or just let it go. But lying there in my hotel room, looking at my negative bank balance on my phone, something hardened inside me. I wasn't going to let this slide. I wasn't going to be the family doormat anymore. Victoria wanted to play power games using money? Fine. I would show her what real power looked like. I spent 2 hours before the ceremony setting up my contingency plan. First, I contacted Happy Paws Animal Shelter, a rescue organization I had volunteered with during college. I explained that I wanted to make a large donation in honor of my sister's wedding, and could they please expedite processing a $4,000 gift? The director, who remembered me from my weekend shifts cleaning kennels, was thrilled and immediately sent me the donation portal information. Next, I drafted a carefully worded social media post about the generous wedding gift Victoria and Marcus were giving to rescue animals, complete with photos of the shelter's adorable adoptable dogs. I scheduled it to post 30 minutes after the reception toasts typically occurred. Then I contacted the wedding venue's AV team and asked them to prepare to display my phone screen on the reception hall's massive projection system, claiming I had a special surprise slideshow for the couple. They were happy to help, especially since I had been so pleasant to work with during all the planning. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Victoria looked stunning in her $8,000 dress, floating down the aisle of the historic chapel we had rented. Marcus seemed genuinely happy, if a bit nervous. Richard beamed with pride while Mom dabbed at her eyes. I sat in my assigned seat in the third row, behind Victoria's sorority sisters and ahead of the Costa family's business associates. The subtle reminder of my place in the family hierarchy. During the cocktail hour, Victoria pulled me aside with a bright smile pasted on her face. "Everything looks amazing," she said, air kissing near my cheek so as not to smudge her makeup. "You really outdid yourself. Daddy was just saying how impressed he is with your organizational skills. Not thank you for the $40,000 I spent. Not I'll pay you back soon. Just praise for my skills, as if I had been hired help rather than her sister and supposed equal partner." "I'm so glad you're happy," I replied, matching her artificial sweetness. "I have a special surprise planned for the reception, something I think you'll find very memorable." She squeezed my hand without really looking at me, already distracted by her maid of honor calling her over for photos. "Can't wait," she said absently, already moving away. That was the moment I knew I had made the right decision. To Victoria, I was just another vendor, another service provider, another person whose value was measured by what I could do for her. The reception hall looked like something from a fairy tale, which made sense considering I had spent 3 months bringing Victoria's Pinterest board fantasies to life. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables draped in champagne silk, each centerpiece a cascading arrangement of white roses and peonies that cost more than my monthly car payment. The band I had hired after auditioning 7 different groups played soft jazz as guests found their seats. Victoria had insisted on assigned seating, naturally placing herself and Marcus at the head table with Richard, Mom, and her closest friends. I was relegated to table 9, tucked in a corner near the kitchen doors with distant cousins I had met exactly twice. I watched Victoria work the room during cocktail hour, her laugh carrying across the space as she accepted congratulations and compliments. She had this way of tilting her head when people praised the wedding details, as if she had personally hand-tied each napkin and arranged each flower. "We just wanted everything to be perfect," I heard her tell Richard's business partner. "We." As if she had done anything beyond point at pictures and say, "I want that one." Marcus seemed oblivious to the financial manipulation, or maybe he just didn't care. His family had money too. Old pharmaceutical money that made the Costas look almost middle class by comparison. The $8,000 reception bill probably seemed like pocket change to him, but it wasn't pocket change to me. It was 3 months of salary. It was my emergency fund, my safety net, my carefully constructed financial independence obliterated because I had been stupid enough to believe Victoria when she promised to be a partner. The cocktail hour stretched on, giving me time to observe the guests Victoria had deemed worthy of attending. Richard's golf buddies and their surgically enhanced wives. Victoria's sorority sisters, all married to men in finance or law. Marcus's groomsmen, a collection of prep school athletes turned investment bankers. Mom's friends from the neighborhood were notably absent. Victoria had explained they wouldn't fit the aesthetic of the wedding she was trying to create. Translation: they weren't wealthy enough to photograph well for her Instagram feed. I nursed a single glass of the premium champagne Victoria had insisted we serve, watching the ice sculpture slowly melt. It was shaped like 2 swans forming a heart, because apparently Victoria's need for symbolism knew no budgetary bounds. That sculpture alone cost $1,200 for ice. That would be water in 6 hours. The absurdity of it all would have been funny if it wasn't destroying my credit score. When the reception officially began, the wedding planner I had hired to coordinate day of logistics ushered everyone to their seats. Victoria and Marcus made their grand entrance to thunderous applause, performing a choreographed first dance that Victoria had paid a professional to teach them. I had to admit, they looked happy. Marcus gazed at her like she hung the moon, completely unaware that his bride was the kind of person who would financially devastate her own sister for aesthetic wedding photos. Dinner service began, and I barely touched my $75 plate of herb-crusted Chilean sea bass. My tablemates made polite conversation about weather and local politics, clearly as awkward about our seating assignment as I was. They knew I was Victoria's sister. They could see where we were placed relative to the head table. The unspoken message was clear to everyone in the room. Between courses, I excused myself to the restroom, pulling out my phone to make final preparations. The donation to Happy Paws was queued up and ready to process. My social media post was scheduled. The AV team confirmed they were ready to project my phone screen on the main display whenever I gave the signal. Everything was in place. My hands were steady as I checked each element. No nervousness, no second thoughts. Just cold, calculated certainty that Victoria needed to learn this lesson. When I returned to my seat, Richard was standing at the head table with a microphone, preparing to give the father of the bride speech. He looked distinguished in his custom tuxedo, every inch the successful businessman and proud patriarch. When Victoria was born, he began, his voice warm with emotion, I knew my life had found its purpose. Watching her grow into this remarkable woman has been my greatest joy. He went on about Victoria's accomplishments, her grace, her beauty, her kindness. Not once did he mention Mom's role in raising her. Not once did he acknowledge the nannies who had actually spent time with Victoria while he was building his business empire. And certainly not once did he mention me. Sitting in the shadows near the kitchen, the daughter who didn't quite fit the Costa legacy narrative, Victoria stood to hug Richard when he finished, tears streaming down her carefully made-up face. The photographer captured every moment, flash after flash, preserving this touching scene for the wedding album. I wondered if she would look at those photos years from now and remember what came next. Probably not. People like Victoria had a remarkable ability to rewrite history in their favor. The maid of honor gave her speech next, a tipsy ramble about college parties and inside jokes that meant nothing to 90% of the guests. Then Marcus's best man shared embarrassing stories from their boarding school days. The mood was light, celebratory, exactly what Victoria had envisioned for her perfect day. I checked my watch. The toasts were running right on schedule. Then Victoria stood, champagne glass in hand, her smile radiant. I just want to take a moment, she said, her voice carrying across the silent room, to thank all of you for being here. Planning this wedding has been such a journey, and I couldn't have done it without the support of my real family. She paused, letting the emphasis on real hang in the air. The true members of the Costa family who have always been there for me. Her eyes swept the head table, lingering on Richard, on her bridesmaids, on Marcus's parents. They didn't even glance toward table 9. Toward me, the sister who had liquidated her savings to pay for every flower, every plate of food, every note of music filling this expensive room. I felt the eyes of my table mates shifting to me, their discomfort palpable. Special thanks to Daddy, Victoria continued, raising her glass toward Richard, for teaching me the importance of family loyalty and knowing who truly has your back. The irony was apparently lost on her, or maybe it wasn't. Maybe this was intentional, a final twist of the knife to remind me of my place. The toast ended with applause and clinking glasses. Victoria sat down, looking pleased with herself. That's when the venue coordinator approached her table, bending down to whisper something. I saw Victoria's expression shift from confusion to alarm as the coordinator gestured toward the approaching waiter carrying the leather portfolio containing the final bill. This was the moment Victoria's entire scheme had been building toward. She had known this bill was coming, had known she would need to produce her half of the payment, and she had calculated that in this room full of witnesses, surrounded by wealthy guests and her adoring father, I wouldn't dare make a scene. I would quietly pay the full amount, swallow my resentment, and maintain the family peace. That's what the doormat Charlotte would have done. The waiter placed the portfolio in front of Victoria. She opened it with a practiced smile, as if she had been expecting this moment. Then she did exactly what I knew she would do. She looked up, her eyes scanning the room until they found me. She raised one perfectly manicured finger and pointed directly at table 9. Charlotte handled all the planning, she announced to the confused waiter, her voice projecting across the silent room. She's the official planner. She'll take care of the payment. Not we'll split it as agreed. Not let me get my checkbook. Just a casual delegation of the entire financial burden to the sister she had just excluded from her toast about real family. The waiter looked uncomfortable, glancing between Victoria and me. Around the room, I could feel the awkward energy building as guests realized they were witnessing something unpleasant. This wasn't part of the wedding script. This was real tension bleeding through the carefully curated celebration. I stood up from table 9, smoothing my dress as I walked toward the head table. Every eye in the room tracked my movement. Victoria's smile faltered slightly as I approached, perhaps recognizing that something was different about my expression. I wasn't wearing my usual accommodating smile. I wasn't radiating the eager-to-please energy she was used to exploiting. You're absolutely right, Victoria, I said, my voice calm and clear. I did handle all the planning, every single detail of this beautiful evening. I gestured around the room, taking in the flowers, the lighting, the elegant table settings. And you're right that I should take care of the payment. Victoria's relief was visible, her shoulders dropping as she prepared to hand me the bill. That's when I reached into my clutch and pulled out my phone. In fact, I've already taken care of it, I continued, holding up the device. I made the payment just a few minutes ago during dinner service. I watched confusion ripple across her face. The waiter looked equally perplexed, checking his paperwork. But ma'am, he said hesitantly, this bill is for the final balance of $8,300. It hasn't been processed yet. Oh, I know, I replied sweetly. I'm not talking about that bill. I turned to the venue coordinator, who had remained nearby, sensing drama. Could you please project my phone screen on the main display? I have a special wedding gift announcement I'd like to share with everyone. The coordinator glanced at Victoria, who nodded numbly, still trying to understand what was happening. Within seconds, my phone screen appeared on the massive projection display behind the head table, visible to every single guest in the room. I pulled up my banking app, showing the transaction I had completed exactly 7 minutes earlier. As Victoria mentioned in her toast, I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. She believes strongly in family loyalty and supporting those who truly matter. That's why I was so inspired to make this donation on behalf of the happy couple. I swiped to the next screen, showing the Happy Paws Animal Shelter donation page. $4,120 to help rescue animals find their forever homes. The silence in the room transformed from uncomfortable to shocked. I heard gasps, confused murmurs, someone dropping their fork with a clatter. On the projection screen, clear as day, was my donation receipt time-stamped 7:43 p.m., complete with the shelter's thank you message and tax deduction information. Since Victoria was so generous in letting me handle all the wedding arrangements alone, I continued, each word precisely chosen, I thought it only fitting to honor her selfless spirit by ensuring this beautiful celebration benefits those who truly need it. The Happy Paws Animal Shelter will be thrilled to receive this contribution in honor of Victoria and Marcus Costa's wedding. Victoria's champagne flute hit the table with enough force to crack the stem. Her face had gone from bridal glow to ash pale in seconds. What did you do? She hissed, her voice barely audible but caught by the microphone I was standing near. I made a charitable donation, I said, my smile never wavering. In your name, using the money from the wedding budget. Specifically, the portion you never intended to pay anyway. I turned to address the room. Many guests now pulling out their phones to photograph or record this unexpected turn of events. For those wondering, Victoria and I agreed to split all wedding costs 50-50. Equal partners, equal responsibility. She said those exact words 6 months ago. I pulled up my spreadsheet on my phone, the one I had meticulously maintained through months of planning. The total cost of this wedding came to $41,236. Victoria's half would be $20,618. In the past 4 months, she has paid exactly $0.00 toward any expense. The projection screen showed my color-coded tracking sheet. Every line item visible. Venue rental, catering, flowers, music, photography, invitations, the dress she was currently wearing. Next to each item was the date paid, the amount, and whose credit card was charged. My name appeared hundreds of times. Victoria's name appeared exactly never. Marcus was staring at his bride with an expression somewhere between confusion and dawning horror. Richard's face had gone red, his jaw clenched tight, but it was my mother's expression that almost made me falter. She looked stricken, caught between her daughters, finally understanding the full scope of what had been happening while she planned shower games and addressed invitations. So when the bill came for tonight's final balance, I continued, and Victoria so graciously delegated it to me, the official planner, I made an executive decision. Instead of enabling her pattern of financial manipulation, I chose to redirect those funds to a cause that actually deserves support. Dogs and cats who need homes, rather than a sister who needs to learn that actions have consequences. Victoria found her voice, shrill and desperate. You had no right. That's my money, our money for the wedding. Your money? I let out a short laugh. Victoria, you haven't contributed a single dollar to this entire event. Not the deposits, not the vendor payments, not the final balance. Every flower in this room, every bite of food on these plates, every note of music we've heard tonight was paid for by me, using my savings, my credit cards, my financial future that I stupidly gambled on your promise to be a partner. I swiped to another screen on my phone, showing text message exchanges. Here's you telling me you'd pay me back next week in February, and March, and April. Here's you dodging my calls when the florist needed her deposit. Here's you blocking me on Venmo after I sent a payment request for your half of the catering. The projection screen cycled through message after message, each one showing Victoria's pattern of avoidance and excuse-making. Some guests were whispering to each other now, the shocked murmurs building into a wave of judgment I could feel washing over the head table. "Charlotte, that's enough." Richard finally spoke, his voice tight with controlled fury. "This is not the time or place for this discussion. You're making a scene at your sister's wedding. You're absolutely right." "Richard," I said, turning to face him directly, "this is Victoria's wedding, her special day, which is why I spent $41,000 making it perfect. Money I earned through years of work, careful budgeting, and sacrifice. Money Victoria felt entitled to simply because I was foolish enough to believe her promises." I looked back at Victoria, who had tears streaming down her face now, her makeup running. Part of me felt guilty for ruining her moment, but the larger part, the part that had been systematically devalued and used, felt nothing but cold satisfaction. "The Happy Paws Animal Shelter has already processed and confirmed my donation," I said, pulling up the confirmation email on the screen. "It's tax-deductible, irrevocable, and made in both your names. So technically, Victoria, you finally contributed to your own wedding. Through my generosity, of course, but it still counts." Marcus stood up slowly, his expression unreadable. "Is this true?" he asked his bride. "Did you really not pay for any of this?" His gesture encompassed the entire reception, the thousands of dollars of carefully curated perfection surrounding them. Victoria opened her mouth, then closed it. What could she say? The evidence was displayed for 200 witnesses to see. The spreadsheet didn't lie. The text messages didn't lie. The only person who had been lying for 6 months was sitting at the head table in an $8,000 dress she had charged to my credit card. I was going to pay her back. Victoria finally managed, her voice small. "After the honeymoon, I told her that." "You told me that in September," I corrected, "and October and November. And last week when I literally begged you for at least partial payment so I could cover the final venue costs. You told Marcus I was making everything about money when I asked you to honor our agreement." I turned to address the room one final time. "I want to be clear that this isn't about the money itself. $40,000 is significant, yes, but I'm a salaried professional. I'll recover financially. This is about respect. About Victoria believing she could use me like an ATM machine with no consequences because I'm not a real Costa. About her assuming I would be too embarrassed or too conditioned to speak up when she pulled this stunt in front of all of you." The waiter still stood awkwardly nearby, the $8,000 bill in his hand. I took it from him, pulling out my personal credit card. "I'll take care of this final balance too," I told him quietly, because unlike some people, I honor my commitments even when they hurt. As I handed over my card, Victoria made a strangled sound. "You're paying it anyway? After that whole dramatic scene?" "Yes," I said simply, "because this venue and these vendors did their job beautifully. They deserve to be compensated for their work. Unlike you, they actually provided value for the money they charged." I signed the receipt with a flourish, adding a generous tip for the staff who had dealt with Victoria's demands for months. "But Charlotte," Mom finally spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "Why didn't you tell us? We could have helped. Worked something out." I looked at my mother, seeing genuine confusion in her eyes, because Victoria was counting on exactly that reaction. On the family smoothing things over, making excuses, asking me to be the bigger person. That's what always happens, isn't it? The real Costas do whatever they want, and everyone else is expected to accommodate and forgive. Richard stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is completely inappropriate. You will apologize to your sister immediately." "No," I said, the word coming out stronger than I expected. "I won't. I'm done apologizing for taking up space in this family. Done pretending that Victoria's wants are more important than my needs. Done being the convenient scapegoat when someone needs to be blamed for not meeting Costa standards." I disconnected my phone from the projection system, the screen going dark. Around the room, guests were still processing what they had witnessed. Phones out, undoubtedly already sharing this drama with their social circles. Victoria's perfect wedding would be remembered, just not the way she had planned. "I'm going to leave now," I announced. "I've done my job as the official planner. The rest of the evening is all yours, Victoria. Enjoy your cake, your first dance, your expensive send-off with the sparklers I bought. Consider it my wedding gift, along with the $4,000 I gave to homeless pets in your name." I started walking toward the exit, my heels clicking against the marble floor in the shocked silence. As I reached the doorway, I heard Victoria's voice, shrill and desperate. "You're petty, jealous. You've always been jealous that I'm Daddy's real daughter." I paused, turning back one last time. "No, Victoria, I'm not jealous. I'm free. Free from the obligation to bankrupt myself for your approval. Free from the delusion that you would ever see me as an equal partner instead of a convenient tool. And free from this family's toxic expectation that love means letting you bleed me dry without complaint. I walked out of the reception hall into the cool evening air, my hands shaking now that the adrenaline was starting to fade. Behind me, I could hear chaos erupting. Victoria's sobs, Marcus's raised voice demanding explanations, Richard barking orders at the wedding coordinator. The perfect celebration I had spent months creating was imploding, and I felt absolutely no remorse. My phone started buzzing before I even reached my car. Text messages flooded in from guests who had witnessed the scene, some supportive, others scandalized. 3 of Victoria's bridesmaids had blocked me already. 2 of Mom's friends who had somehow heard about the drama sent messages of quiet support. A cousin I barely knew sent a gif of someone dropping a microphone. The most unexpected message came from Marcus's mother, Eleanor, the pharmaceutical heiress who had looked down her nose at me during family dinners. Good for you, it read simply. She needs to learn that actions have consequences. Marcus does too, apparently. I sat in my car in the parking lot, watching well-dressed guests begin to trickle out of the venue earlier than planned. The party was clearly ending prematurely. Part of me felt guilty about ruining what was supposed to be a joyful celebration, but the larger part recognized that the celebration had been built on a foundation of exploitation and lies. Better to tear it down now than let it stand as proof that manipulating family was acceptable. My phone rang. Mom. I let it go to voicemail. Then Richard. Voicemail. Then Victoria herself calling 6 times in rapid succession. Each call went unanswered. I had said everything I needed to say in front of 200 witnesses. There was nothing left to discuss. Finally, I drove back to my apartment, the same modest 1-bedroom I had been saving to move out of before Victoria drained my funds. I changed out of my bridesmaid dress, carefully hanging it in the closet. It had cost $800, charged to my card, of course, in the specific shade of blush pink Victoria had insisted her wedding party wear. I would never wear it again, but I kept it as a tangible reminder of this lesson learned. Sleep was impossible. I lay in bed scrolling through social media, watching in real time as news of my donation spread. Someone had recorded the entire confrontation and posted it to Instagram. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times. The comment section was a battlefield. She's a hero for standing up to her entitled sister. Read one comment with 1,500 likes. This is trashy behavior at a wedding. Read another with 800. Imagine being so petty you ruin your sister's special day over money. That one made me laugh. Money I had actually spent, not theoretical money. Real debt on my real credit cards. By morning, the video had gone viral. News outlets were picking up the story with headlines like Wedding Revenge and Sister's Savage Donation. I woke to hundreds of notifications, interview requests from local news stations, and a particularly aggressive voicemail from Richard's attorney threatening legal action for defamation and intentional infliction of emotional distress. Mom showed up at my apartment at 8 a.m., looking like she hadn't slept. I let her in, making coffee while she sat at my small kitchen table in silence. When I finally sat down across from her, she just stared at me with exhausted, red-rimmed eyes. "Why didn't you tell me it was that bad?" she asked quietly. "Would you have believed me?" I countered. "Or would you have asked me to be patient, give Victoria time, not make waves with Richard's family?" She flinched at the accuracy of my assessment. "I didn't know she hadn't paid anything. She told me you two were splitting costs. I thought you were both contributing." "She lied to you, Mom. Like she lied to me. Like she's been lying to everyone about what kind of person she really is." Mom wrapped her hands around her coffee mug, not drinking. "Richard is furious. He wants to cut you out of the family completely. Says you've embarrassed them beyond repair." "I've embarrassed them?" I couldn't help the bitter laugh. Victoria committed fraud, essentially. Accepted my money under false pretenses with no intention of repaying it. But I'm the embarrassment because I refused to silently absorb her betrayal. He's saying he'll reimburse you for the wedding expenses if you publicly apologize and admit you overreacted. I looked at my mother carefully. "Do you think I overreacted?" She was quiet for a long moment. "I think you could have handled it differently. More privately." I tried private, Mom, for 6 months. Every time I asked Victoria for payment, every time I tried to discuss the budget, every time I sent her a receipt or payment request, she ignored me or made excuses. She only felt comfortable pulling that stunt last night because she assumed I would never call her out publicly, that I would be too well-trained, too conditioned to maintain family peace. "You donated $4,000 without her permission." "I donated my $4,000, Mom. Money I had already spent on her wedding. Money she never intended to pay back." I just redirected where it went from her pocket to a worthy cause. Mom set down her coffee cup, her hands trembling slightly. She's my daughter too, Charlotte. I love you both. I know you do. But you've always loved us differently. Victoria gets unconditional acceptance. I get conditional approval based on how useful I can be without causing problems. The truth of that statement hung between us. Mom opened her mouth to protest, then closed it. We both knew I was right. The decades of subtle favoritism, of looking the other way when Richard treated me as less than, of asking me to understand Victoria's perspective while never asking Victoria to understand mine. What happens now? Mom asked finally. Now I rebuild my finances, block everyone who thinks I owe them an apology, and move on with my life. Victoria learned that I'm not a doormat she can wipe her feet on. Richard learned that not everyone can be bought or intimidated into silence. And hopefully you learned that asking me to sacrifice myself to keep the peace isn't actually keeping peace. It's just teaching bullies that they can get away with anything as long as they have your protection. The aftermath of Victoria's wedding unfolded like a slow-motion car crash over the following weeks. The viral video had been picked up by major news outlets, with legal and financial experts weighing in on whether Victoria's behavior constituted fraud. My donation to Happy Paws had sparked a wave of similar revenge charity donations, with the shelter receiving over $50,000 from strangers who had seen the video and wanted to support the cause. Richard made good on his threat to cut me off from the family, not that there was much to cut. I had never been on his will, never had access to Costa family accounts, never been included in the trust funds Victoria took for granted. The only thing that changed was no longer being invited to Sunday dinners I had dreaded attending anyway. Victoria and Marcus postponed their honeymoon indefinitely while dealing with the fallout. According to the gossip that filtered back through Mom, their relationship was strained. Marcus had been genuinely blindsided by his wife's financial deception, having assumed she was an equal partner in funding their celebration. Learning that his bride had effectively stolen $40,000 from her sister to throw a party had shaken his trust. The most satisfying development came 3 weeks after the wedding. I received a certified letter from Victoria's attorney containing a payment plan proposal. She would pay me back the $41,000 over 5 years with 3% interest. The tone of the letter was resentful, clearly written under Marcus's direction, rather than from any genuine remorse. I drafted a counterproposal through my own attorney. Victoria would pay the full amount within 90 days, or I would pursue legal action for fraud and breach of contract. I included every text message, every email, every promise she had made and broken. My lawyer assured me we had an airtight case. 2 months after the wedding, I received a wire transfer for $41,236. No apology, no explanation. Just the money. Returned at Marcus's insistence, according to Mom. Apparently, his family had been appalled by Victoria's behavior, and his mother Eleanor had made it clear that her son's wife would not be a thief, regardless of who the victim was. I used the money exactly as I had originally planned. Down payment on a 2-bedroom condo in a safe neighborhood. The rest into my savings account, rebuilding what Victoria had destroyed. I never spent the money on anything frivolous, wanting it to represent security rather than revenge. The video of my confrontation continued to circulate for months, spawning think pieces about family dynamics, financial boundaries, and the weaponization of weddings. I declined every interview request, having no interest in becoming the poster child for family revenge. I had said what I needed to say that night at the reception. I owed the public nothing further. Victoria attempted to reach out several times, messages ranging from defensive, "You totally overreacted," to manipulative, "Family is supposed to forgive," to vaguely threatening, "You'll regret burning this bridge." I blocked her number after the 5th attempt. Whatever relationship we might have salvaged died the moment she pointed at me and delegated that bill. Marcus filed for divorce 8 months after their wedding. According to Mom, who maintained minimal contact with both of us, Victoria's financial dishonesty had been the tip of the iceberg. Once Marcus started looking closely at her behavior patterns, he recognized manipulation and entitlement that extended far beyond the wedding situation. The marriage ended quietly, with Victoria moving back in with Richard while she figured out her next steps. I felt nothing when I heard about the divorce. No satisfaction, no sympathy, just a distant acknowledgement that people who build relationships on lies and exploitation rarely sustain them. Marcus deserved better, and Victoria deserved exactly what she got: consequences. My relationship with Mom slowly rebuilt over the following year. though it would never return to what it had been. She had made her choice when she asked me to apologize rather than demanding Victoria make amends. I could be cordial, could meet her for occasional coffee, but the unconditional trust was gone. She had shown me that maintaining appearances mattered more than protecting me from harm. Richard, predictably, never acknowledged any wrongdoing. In his worldview, I was the problem child who had embarrassed the family. Victoria was the victim of my jealousy and pettiness. He told people at his country club that I had always been troubled, jealous of my sister's success, unable to handle not being the center of attention. The narrative was absurd, but effective within his social circle. I learned to live with being the villain in the Costa family story. Let them rewrite history to paint Victoria as innocent and me as vindictive. I had the bank statements showing who paid for what. I had the text messages proving the promises made and broken. I had the truth, even if they chose to ignore it. The most unexpected benefit of the whole situation was professional. My calm, methodical destruction of Victoria's manipulation had impressed several people at my company. When a director position opened in our event marketing division, I was offered the role with a significant salary increase. Apparently, someone who could plan a $40,000 event down to the last detail while simultaneously managing a public confrontation demonstrated exactly the kind of strategic thinking they valued. I used my first bonus from the new position to make another donation to Happy Paws Animal Shelter. $5,000, given anonymously this time. Not revenge charity, just genuine support for the organization that had inadvertently played a role in my liberation from Victoria's exploitation. A year after the wedding, I ran into one of Victoria's bridesmaids at a coffee shop. Jessica, who had blocked me immediately after the reception, approached hesitantly. "I owe you an apology," she said quietly. Victoria pulled the same thing on me with her bachelorette party. Promised to split costs, then stuck me with the entire bill. I thought I was the only one she treated that way. I learned through that conversation that I was part of a pattern, not an isolated incident. Victoria had left unpaid tabs, borrowed money she never returned, and manipulated friends into funding her lifestyle for years. My public confrontation had freed others to speak up about their own experiences. Several of her former friends had cut ties completely once they realized her behavior wasn't going to change. The wedding video occasionally resurfaces on social media, usually with new commentary about family dynamics or financial boundaries. Each time it trends, I receive a fresh wave of messages from strangers sharing their own stories of family financial exploitation. Some thank me for standing up. Others criticize me for not handling it privately. I've stopped reading the comments, having learned that public opinion is fickle and largely irrelevant to my actual life. Victoria eventually moved to California, according to Mom's infrequent updates. Something about a fresh start and new opportunities. I suspect she needed to escape the reputation she had built in our hometown, where people now knew exactly what kind of person she was beneath the polished exterior. Richard never speaks to me, which suits us both fine. I attended one family event at Mom's insistence, a cousin's graduation party, and he looked through me like I was invisible. The invisible treatment was honestly preferable to the condescending tolerance I had endured for years. As for the $40,000 Victoria eventually repaid, it sits in my investment account earning steady returns. Every quarter when I check my balance and see how much it has grown, I think about the lesson I learned. The most expensive education sometimes comes from the people we love and trust. And the most valuable outcome isn't the money recovered, but the self-respect gained from refusing to be anyone's doormat ever again. 3 years after Victoria's wedding, I stood in my own home, a small but beautiful craftsman house I had purchased with careful planning and saved funds. No Costa money, no family loans, just my own earnings and discipline. The wedding video had long since faded from viral status, though it occasionally resurfaced during slow news cycles as a cautionary tale about family dynamics. I had built a life completely separate from the Costa sphere of influence. New friends who knew nothing about viral videos or wedding drama. A thriving career as director of event marketing for a national firm. A relationship with someone who valued transparency and equal partnership, having learned exactly what happened when those principles were violated. Mom and I maintained a relationship, though carefully boundaried. We met for lunch once a month, talked about safe topics, avoided discussing Victoria or Richard. She had made her peace with having damaged our relationship beyond full repair, though I could see in her eyes that she regretted not standing up for me sooner. Victoria's life had taken a predictably different trajectory. According to the minimal information Mom shared, my sister had married again, this time to someone from a less prominent family. No extravagant wedding this time, just a small ceremony at City Hall. She worked in retail management and lived in a modest apartment in San Diego. The privileged princess life she had expected to maintain indefinitely had evaporated once Marcus's family money was no longer accessible, and Richard's patience with her financial irresponsibility ran out. I felt no satisfaction in her diminished circumstances, but I felt no sympathy either. Victoria had learned what happens when you burn through every relationship by treating people as resources to exploit, rather than humans to respect. The lesson had come late and at significant cost, but it had come. Richard died of a heart attack 2 years post-wedding, leaving his estate primarily to Victoria with a modest amount for Mom. I was mentioned only to be explicitly excluded, the will stating I had demonstrated through my actions that I considered myself apart from the Costa family. The pettiness was somehow fitting, a final assertion of power that meant nothing because I had never expected or wanted his money anyway. What Richard's death did accomplish was freeing Mom from the unspoken pressure to maintain appearances. She started speaking more honestly about the family dynamics she had tolerated for too long, acknowledging Victoria's entitlement and Richard's favoritism. It was too late to undo decades of damage, but the acknowledgement itself had value. The Happy Paws Animal Shelter still sent me quarterly updates, having added me to their donor recognition wall after my initial donation sparked that wave of contributions. I visited occasionally, volunteering on weekends when my schedule allowed. There was something healing about caring for creatures who had been abandoned or mistreated, helping them find new homes where they would be valued. Sometimes I wondered what would have happened if I had quietly paid that $8,000 bill and swallowed Victoria's betrayal. I would probably still be trapped in the pattern of accommodating and enabling, still playing the role of the grateful outsider, thankful for scraps of Costa acceptance. My bank account would be devastated, my self-respect would be non-existent, and Victoria would have learned that she could exploit me without consequence. Instead, I had drawn a line. The fallout had been brutal, the social cost significant, but the alternative would have been slow death by 1,000 compromises. Some people called my response petty. Those people had never spent decades being systematically devalued by people who claimed to love them. The most unexpected vindication came from Marcus himself. 2 years after his divorce from Victoria, he reached out via email. His message was brief but meaningful. I owe you an apology. You tried to show me who she really was that night, and I was too shocked to see it clearly. Thank you for having the courage to expose the truth, even knowing it would cost you. That took real strength. We never became friends, our connection too tangled in painful history. But his acknowledgement mattered. He had recognized that my actions weren't about cruelty or revenge, but about refusing to enable destructive behavior. He had gone on to remarry as well, this time to someone his mother described as refreshingly honest and self-sufficient. I received occasional messages from strangers who had seen the wedding video, sharing their own stories of family financial exploitation. Some had found the courage to set boundaries because of what they witnessed. Others just needed to tell someone who would understand what it felt like to be used by people who claimed to love you. To each one, I offered the same advice. Protect yourself first. Family is not an obligation to be bled dry. Real love doesn't demand financial martyrdom. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let people face the consequences of their choices instead of shielding them from reality. My career had flourished specifically because of the skills I had demonstrated during that confrontation. The ability to remain calm under pressure, to present facts clearly, to make difficult decisions in real time. My company promoted me again 18 months after the first promotion, this time to Vice President of Client Services. The irony wasn't lost on me that Victoria's betrayal had inadvertently accelerated my professional trajectory. I used my increased income to do something I had never been able to afford before. I established a small scholarship fund for first-generation college students studying business. Students like I had been, working multiple jobs and taking out loans because their families couldn't or wouldn't support their education. The fund wasn't large enough to change lives dramatically, but it helped a handful of students each year with textbooks and supplies. The scholarship application never mentioned the wedding video or my family drama. It was simply called the Financial Independence Scholarship, and it required applicants to submit an essay about a time they had to advocate for themselves, despite pressure to accommodate others. The essays I received each year were heartbreaking and inspiring in equal measure. Victoria never apologized, not genuinely. The payment she sent was extracted under pressure from Marcus's family, not from any real recognition that she had wronged me. And I made peace with that. Some people are fundamentally incapable of seeing beyond their own wants and needs. Waiting for them to change is like waiting for rain in a desert. You might get lucky, but you'll probably just die of thirst. 5 years after the wedding, I received an unexpected wedding invitation. Not from Victoria, but from Mom. She was marrying Gerald, a retired teacher she had met at a community center book club. The invitation was simple, handwritten, and included a personal note. I know I have no right to ask, but I would love for you to be there. No expectations, no pressure. Just hope. I attended the small ceremony at a local park, watching Mom promise to love and cherish someone who treated her as an equal partner. Gerald was kind, unpretentious, everything Richard had not been. During the modest reception at a neighborhood restaurant, Mom pulled me aside. "I'm sorry," she said quietly, tears in her eyes. "For all the times I asked you to be the bigger person instead of protecting you from people who were hurting you. For choosing peace over justice. For not seeing what was happening until it was too late to fix easily." "I know, Mom," I said, and I meant it. Forgiveness didn't erase the damage, but it allowed us both to move forward without carrying the full weight of past failures. Victoria did not attend Mom's wedding. They had barely spoken since the divorce, Mom having finally recognized that her younger daughter's problems were self-inflicted, and enabling them helped no one. The distance between them seemed permanent, though Mom held out hope for eventual reconciliation. I had no such hopes and was content with that reality. On the 10-year anniversary of Victoria's wedding, the video resurfaced again, this time with added context from a financial advice influencer using it as an example of the importance of written contracts even with family. I watched it for the first time in years, seeing my younger self stand up in that reception hall with a clarity born from desperation. That version of Charlotte had been terrified but determined, financially devastated but morally certain. She had known the cost of speaking up and chosen to pay it anyway. Looking back, I was proud of her. She had saved me from a lifetime of being someone's ATM machine and punching bag. The comments on the anniversary repost were still divided. "Icon behavior," read one popular comment. "Imagine being this bitter at your own sister's wedding," read another. The debate would probably continue forever, people projecting their own family dynamics onto a situation they didn't fully understand. But I was long past caring about public opinion. The people who mattered knew the truth. The people who didn't know the truth didn't matter. And Victoria, wherever she was living with the consequences of treating human relationships like business transactions, where only her profit mattered. I often thought about that moment when she pointed at me across the reception hall, casually delegating the entire financial burden with complete confidence that I would comply. The look on her face when I refused to play my assigned role, the shock when she realized I had outmaneuvered her completely. That was the moment our relationship truly ended, though it had been dying for years under the weight of her exploitation and my enabling. Some relationships can't survive truth-telling, and that's not always a bad thing. As I sat in my paid-off house looking at my healthy retirement accounts and stable career, I felt something I had never experienced in the Costa household. Genuine contentment. Not the conditional approval that came from being useful, but the deep satisfaction of having built a life on my own terms with my own resources. Victoria got her dream wedding, though it probably wasn't everything she had hoped for once the reality of financial responsibility set in. She got to look beautiful in her expensive dress and receive congratulations from 200 guests. But she lost her marriage, her reputation, and the one family member who had been willing to sacrifice her own financial security for Victoria's happiness. I got my self-respect back, and a viral video that would follow me forever. For better or worse. But mostly, I got free from the expectation that love meant letting people destroy me while smiling and saying thank you. The $4,120 I donated to Happy Paws that night was the best investment I ever made. It bought me freedom from a toxic family dynamic, clarity about my own worth, and the satisfaction of knowing that at least some good came from Victoria's selfishness. The shelter had used that initial donation wave to expand their facilities, rescue hundreds more animals, and create a financial assistance program for pet owners facing hardship. Every year on the anniversary of the wedding, I made another donation to Happy Paws. Not as revenge, not as a reminder, just as a celebration of the day I chose myself over family obligation. The day I learned that sometimes burning bridges is an act of self-preservation, not destruction. Victoria's wedding taught me many lessons, most of them painful, but the most valuable was this. You teach people how to treat you. If you allow exploitation, it will continue. If you demand respect, even at tremendous cost, you might lose relationships, but you gain something far more valuable. You gain yourself back. And no amount of family loyalty is worth losing that.